The panel found that a confluence of several shortcomings on the part of both MDDI and ACRA and how they had interacted with each other on the issue led to the incident. First, the panel found that MDDI should have been clearer in its policy communications in its July 2024 CM. MDDI and ACRA staff did not realize that ACRA had misunderstood how the July 2024 CM applied to the new Bizfile portal. Specifically, MDDI should have explained key terms and phrases in the CM more clearly. Although MDDI did make efforts to brief agencies on the requirements of the July 2024 CM and disseminated the video recording of the briefing as well as the FAQs to them, the relevant documents were not appended to the CM. So if one referred to the CM, one would not have seen the other clarifications arising from the session that MDDI had with the agencies. Second, there were internal shortcomings within ACRA in sharing and acting on the information from MDDI on the July 2024 CM. The FAQs mentioned earlier were not properly disseminated within ACRA by the officers who had attended the briefing and the officers who had received the video and the email of what had happened. And this contributed to ACRA's continued misinterpretation of the July 2024 CM and resulted in them making decisions based on incomplete information. These FAQs would, for example, have alerted ACRA that stopping the use of partial NRIC numbers did not mean showing full NRIC numbers in every case, and agencies could decide to drop the use of NRIC numbers altogether. Third, the panel found that MDDI should have paid more attention to the implementation plan for new use cases of partial NRIC numbers that were more complex, such as public registries. The panel found that in directing agencies to stop new use cases of partial NRIC numbers, MDDI did not differentiate between simpler use cases like one-to-one correspondence between public agencies and members of the public, and more complex use cases like public registries, which could potentially disclose a large amount of data to third parties performing searches. ACRA, as the National Business Registry of Singapore, is one such public registry. One of ACRA's functions is to provide public access to certain information in the registry so as to maintain corporate transparency. The standard approach for public registries is to have safeguards, such as a paywall, so that as far as possible, access to the needed information from the registry is available only to users for whom the service is intended. But there is also often a search function for the registry before these safeguards, which is open to everyone, to narrow down the information in the registry which the user wishes to access. And agencies have to determine how much to reveal when someone performs a search without having to go through safeguards such as a paywall for the information. For such complex use cases, additional guidance from MDDI would have helped agencies decide whether disclosing full NRIC numbers was necessary, and if so, determine what safeguards should be put in place. Fourth, in deciding to disclose full NRIC numbers in People Search, ACRA did not first assess the proper balance between sharing full NRIC numbers and ensuring that they were not too readily accessible on the People Search function. This contravened the government's internal rules on data management, namely IM8, which ACRA was required to comply with under the Public Sector Governance Act, or PSGA for short. Sir, ACRA's frame of mind when interpreting the July 2024 CM was influenced by its discussions with MDDI 5 months earlier in February 2024. In February 2024, 5 months earlier, ACRA had planned to change to its people profile, the part after the paywall, to only provide partial NRIC numbers instead of the full NRIC numbers, which it had all along been providing. At that time, SNDGO had advised ACRA on the wider move towards stopping public agencies from using partial NRIC numbers. So this was in February. Bizfile users had also given feedback to ACRA that full NRIC numbers were needed for corporate transparency. So in view of this feedback and ACRA's exchange with SNDGO, ACRA decided to continue providing the full NRIC numbers in the people profile function instead of making its proposed changes to partial NRIC numbers. So this is the people profile function, which is after the paywall, and this were events and discussions in February, 5 months before the events that occurred. So this exchange with SNDGO in February gave ACRA the impression that the policy intent was to unmask all partial NRIC numbers, which was not the case. But that was ACRA's frame of mind when interpreting how the July 2024 CM should be applied to the people search function in the new Bizfile portal, specifically whether to continue providing partial NRIC numbers or to change to providing full NRIC numbers instead, to the part before the paywall. Nonetheless, even if ACRA was under the mistaken impression that the July 2024 CM required them to disclose full NRIC numbers in people's search, ACRA ought to still have, as required by IM8, assess the proper balance between the public interest in sharing full NRIC numbers, which was to promote corporate transparency, and the competing public interest in ensuring that full NRIC numbers were not too readily accessible. The panel found that the design of the people search function of the new Bizfile portal made individual NRIC numbers too easily available to those who were improperly using the people search function in a way that went beyond its intended purpose. Fifth, the review found that certain security features for the people search function were not adequately implemented for the new Bizfile portal. ACRA had required its IT vendor to implement various security features in the people search function of the new Bizfile portal to protect against unintended users by, for instance, limiting the extent of the searches allowed. However, certain security features were not adequately implemented when the new Bizfile portal was launched on 9 December 2024. After displaying the people search function, ACRA requested that the Government Technology Agency review the security features of the people search function. But this was after the fact, after the people search function had already been launched. The review found that some security features, including the capture functionality, were not adequately implemented, allowing potential data retrieval using scripts from the 9th to the 13th of December 2024. These security issues were rectified by the vendor in the revised people search function before it resumed service on the 28th of December 2024. ACRA is following up with the vendor and considering all its available options. Without prejudice to any such options, the panel noted that ACRA remains ultimately accountable for the implementation of the People Search function, even though it had contracted this to its vendor. The sixth and last finding of the panel was that the incident management after public concerns on the Bizfile portal surfaced on 12 December 2024 should have been better. Upon receiving the public feedback, ACRA and MDDI should have ascertained more quickly the key facts of how the Bizfile incident happened, and ACRA should have disabled the People Search function sooner. Doing so would have addressed public concerns in a more timely manner. The public communications and response to public concerns should also have been better coordinated and clearer. And in hindsight, the government should have made clear to the public at the outset that moving away from the use of partial NRIC numbers did not automatically mean using full NRIC numbers in every case or disclosing them on a large scale. The panel noted that the incident took place before MDDI had begun public education and engagement on the proper use of NRIC numbers as a unique identifier. If you recall, the implementation of this was in the public sector, and engagement of the private sector had not begun yet. So this exacerbated public concerns when full NRIC numbers were easily searchable and accessible in the People Search function, since many members of the public would not have been familiar with the issues associated with the use of NRIC numbers. The panel was of the view that it would have been better for MDDI to have embarked on public education and engagement earlier than what it had planned. Mr. Speaker, sir, the details of the panel's findings are in the report. Having reviewed it, I agree with the findings. I would like to thank the panel for their thorough work on this matter. As I stated earlier, ACRA and MDDI have both accepted the panel's findings and are following up to address the issues identified as set out in their respective media statements.